For years, I put up with my mother saying, "It's a shame you didn't find a girl as lovely as Amanda." I'm Steve Hollis, and Amanda was the wife of my older brother Mark. Amanda was pretty and came from a rich family, but for some reason it seemed to me that money wasn't everything. When I was in school, I hung out with a large group of friends, guys and girls. Basically, we were all just friends. My mother hoped that I would start dating one of them, Karen. I didn't stand a chance. Karen was way out of my league, and I knew it. After we all graduated, I kept in touch with some of the old company. Some just moved on to new friendships, usually with work colleagues. I was working as a trainee auto mechanic when I met Laura. Laura was not the most beautiful of the girls, partly because she rarely wore makeup. I really liked her, and after I got up the courage to ask her out, we started dating. Like every other couple back then, we had sex, and like a lot of couples, we screwed up and Laura got pregnant. One evening, we sat and discussed it, scared to death. In the end, we both agreed that abortion was out of the question. We were both worried about how we would tell our parents. I did the only decent thing I could think of and asked Laura to marry me. Her parents weren't happy that she was pregnant, although her father gave me credit for not running away from his daughter. My parents weren't happy, and they let me know. My mother almost fainted when I said we were getting married. Since neither of us had any money or wealthy parents, we got married at the local registry office, my brother as my best man and witness, Laura's sister doing the honors as bridesmaid and witness. There was no honeymoon due to lack of funds, so we started looking for somewhere to live. My boss's brother had a rental and property management company, and we agreed to rent a small 2-room apartment in a decent area. I went with Laura for an ultrasound, and we found out that she was expecting twins. We looked at each other with an expression of, "What the hell are we going to do with all this?" It will be seen. We decided that we would do our best and always put the children first. I worked long hours to pay for everything we needed. One evening, as we were sitting and watching TV, there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw my boss Brian and his wife Linda standing there smiling. We had a cup of coffee, talked, and the question of how we were going to manage our finances was raised. "Steve, I know you're having a hard time with having children, and we want to help. Let me know if you need anything and we'll take care of it." Laura was speechless and began to cry. Linda sat and calmed her down. "I don't know what to say, Brian, other than thank you." "Don't say anything, kid. You're busting your ass, so I think you deserve some help." Brian was true to his word, and after we made a list of what we needed, I handed it to him with the words, "We will be extremely grateful for anything you buy." Knowing Brian, I assumed he would buy the most expensive item so we could more easily afford the other items on the list. Both Laura and I were completely stunned a couple of days later when they showed up with a full shopping list. Linda explained that they had been in our situation once and knew what it was like to struggle. The difference between us was that Brian and Linda couldn't have children and they felt the need to help us. Not long before this, my brother and his girlfriend Amanda got married. They were both 22 at the time. Amanda's parents paid for the wedding. It was a luxurious event with expensive flowers and decorations. I think Laura was a little jealous that we didn't have such a wedding. Twice during the wedding reception, my mother made the remark, "It's a shame you didn't meet a girl as nice as Amanda." This drove me crazy because Laura was fine. She was working just like me, and we spent the rest of our time getting ready for the twins. I admit that Laura is not the best housekeeper in the world, but the house is always clean and tidy. The big day arrived and Laura gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We settled on Jason and Sarah as names. It was hard work for both of us at first, and it became even harder for Laura when I returned to work after a few days off. I worked as hard as I could and Laura did a great job taking care of the babies. Sometimes I came home and all three of them were already asleep. Many times I cooked dinner and only. Then woke Laura up. We ate, talked about our days, and then cleaned up. Our sex life was fine, but nothing to shout about. Most of the time we were so tired that we would cuddle in bed and fall asleep before we could do anything. And yet, when we made love, Laura always enjoyed it and never complained. My parents visited quite often to see their grandchildren. My mother always grumbled about the state of the apartment. We didn't have a clothes dryer, so everything was on the shelves in front of the radiators. I tried to ignore her comments. I knew how hard it was for Laura to cope with two kids alone all day. As a thank you, we asked Brian and Linda to be Jason and Sarah's godparents. They were thrilled and agreed immediately. My brother told me that Jason and Sarah would be the only grandchildren Mom and Dad would get. Amanda decided she didn't want children. Laura and I struggled for several years until the kids started school. Laura returned to work, and soon we were renting a house with a small garden where the children could play. It took us a while, but we got the apartment in order, even though all the furniture was secondhand. The only new things we bought were our bed and cribs. Our parents were always happy to see us when we came to visit. The grandchildren grew up quickly, and they loved the large garden in my parents' backyard. Laura's mother was sick, and her father spent all his free time caring for her. He appreciated everything we did to help, although our capabilities were unfortunately limited. What started to bother me was that whenever we went to visit my parents, Mark would be there without Amanda. Once I asked where she was, Mark said that she was away for work. My father looked at me as if he wanted to say, "Do not ask." We didn't see Mark and Amanda often. I think it was more of Amanda's choice than Mark's. Whenever they came to visit, I got the impression that she considered herself superior to Laura. Amanda usually made a few comments about how having children was very restrictive, and she liked her freedom. Laura and I chose to ignore her rather than start an argument. Shortly before the twins' 6th birthday, Mark called us to say that Amanda was away at work and he was bored. I had a feeling that he wasn't telling me something, but I wasn't too sure how to approach him. A few days later, I found out what was bothering my brother. I was road testing a client's car when I drove past where Amanda was working. She walked out of her office holding hands with some guy as they walked across the street and stopped to kiss. It was the kind of kiss that a married woman cannot give to anyone other than her husband. I was torn by doubts whether I should tell my brother about what I had seen. Laura said I had to tell him. I knew my brother well enough to know that if Amanda cheated, then it was over between them. He wouldn't stand for it. I decided to go and consult with my father. I hoped that he could tell me whether to remain silent or not. Son, everyone makes mistakes in life. What matters is whether they learn from them. But Dad, she might be having an affair, and that's wrong. I know, Steve, but I think it's best if we let Mark handle this himself for now. If he finds out, then we can be there to support him. But he probably won't want you to tell him that Amanda is cheating. I decided to keep quiet for now. A few weeks later, Mark called and asked if I could help him on a Friday night. Naturally, I agreed, and he picked me up just after 7 in the evening. So what do you need help with, Mark? You'll see when we get there. I still hope I'm wrong. Mark drove to the Hilton Hotel, about 30 miles from home, and parked the car. Please let me be wrong, he muttered as I followed him to the reception. After a brief conversation and presentation of his driver's license, Mark was given a key card to Amanda's room. In the elevator, he told me that he found out it wasn't a business trip, and he wanted to know what Amanda was up to. As we approached the room, we heard noises inside, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on inside. Mark inserted the key card into the door and opened it very slowly. We crept inside, me 2 steps behind him. "Oh God, take me." Amanda's voice filled the room. She was in bed with 2 men. Mark stood and watched for several seconds, filming what was happening. They were so engrossed that none of them noticed us. I saw Mark slowly move forward. Then he swung his leg and kicked one guy right in the balls. The man howled, lost consciousness, and fell off the bed. Amanda screamed and looked over her shoulder to see us standing there and covered herself with the sheet. The second guy got out of bed and walked towards us. "Fucking perverts! Get the hell out!" he yelled. Mark punched the guy in the face, and when the guy stumbled back, my foot hit him in the crotch. He vomited on the bed. Amanda looked at this with tears in her eyes. "You fucking slut. Don't bother going home. I'll take your things to your parents. You can stay there." Mark growled at her before turning and walking away, me following on his heels. I was silent. It is clear that my brother was not in the mood to talk. Once out, Mark used wire cutters and cut all the valve stems on Amanda's car. It would take her some time to rebuild the car. We walked back to Mark's house in silence. Then we packed all of Amanda's clothes and belongings into boxes and loaded them into the car. I had only glimpsed Amanda's parents at the wedding and had no idea how they would react to the news that their daughter was coming home. Together with Mark, we unloaded all the boxes onto the doorstep. I stood aside when Mark rang the doorbell. "Mark, what are you doing here and what are these boxes?" asked Amanda's mother. "These are all Amanda's things. Since we are no longer husband and wife, I thought she might come back here. Look, that's why we're breaking up." Mark held up his phone for her mother to watch the video. The poor woman almost fainted. We left them to carry the boxes into the house. Mark drove me home. I invited him to come inside, but he refused, saying that he wanted to be alone for a while. The twins were sleeping, and I checked on them before joining Laura in the living room and explaining what had happened. She was clearly shocked that Amanda would act this way and expressed her sadness. Things got really messy when it came to divorce. Amanda started by wanting to see a psychologist. Mark refused, saying that the marriage was over. I didn't know it at the time, but she had been having sex with these 2 guys for almost 6 months. When Amanda realized that Mark was not interested in saving the marriage, she began to demand almost everything that came to her hand. This stopped when Mark threatened to release the video so her bosses could see it. Amanda eventually accepted that the marriage was over and agreed to Mark's terms. I don't know the details, but she didn't come out of it very well. Shortly after the divorce was finalized, Amanda began speaking ill of my brother to anyone who would listen. She made the mistake of doing this while Laura and I were at a rare party, my parents babysitting so we could go to the pub. We were talking with a few friends when Amanda began her venomous speech. Before I could say a word, Laura stood in front of her. "If you wanted sex with just anyone, like an ordinary depraved woman, why did you even bother marrying Mark? He didn't deserve to be treated like that, Amanda. You worthless creature." Amanda stood shocked and silent as Laura slapped her across the face. "Before you start swearing, why don't you tell people what you were doing in a hotel room with 2 men? You disgust me." Laura returned to our group as Amanda silently left the pub, many giggling after her. Later that evening, I told my mom and dad what happened. My dad smiled and said, "Amanda deserved it." When I was alone with my mother, I asked her a question. "Do you still regret that I didn't meet such a lovely girl like Amanda?" Mom looked at me and smiled as if to say, "Okay, I was wrong." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.